Hi there, my name is Sam from Bros.com. It's time for another smartphone comparison. This time we are comparing the Oppo Find X3 Pro with the Oppo Find X2 Pro. We are comparing both in terms of display, performance, camera, design and battery. So stay tuned and find out which phone is in our opinion the better phone. If you'd like to see more videos like this, feel free to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Let's start straight away with our review. Let the facts speak. Performance. The Oppo Find X2 Pro has the Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 chip with 12GB RAM with 512GB internal storage capacity. The storage capacity unfortunately cannot be expanded. 12GB RAM and 512GB storage are pretty good numbers. The chip, however, is a bit outdated. Next up, the X3 Pro. The X3 Pro is equipped with Qualcomm's latest chip, the Snapdragon 888. The phone has 12GB RAM and a storage capacity of 256GB. The storage capacity unfortunately cannot be expanded. So, the latest Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 versus its older sibling, the Snapdragon 865. Does the 865 stand a chance? Let's take them into the Antutu benchmark and the Geekbench 5 test and find out. The tests are divided into three phases: a performance test of the RAM, a test of how the device is handling two-dimensional graphics, and an endurance test of how the device is handling 3D graphics. The second test is from Geekbench. This app will measure the performance of our smartphones in terms of CPU and GPU. So, as expected, when you compare an older with a newer phone performance-wise, there are no surprises here. The X3 Pro and its newer Snapdragon are able to outperform its predecessor in all three test categories. Although you have to give the X2 props for its test result in the Geekbench 5 tests and its higher storage capacities. Still, the point goes certainly to Oppo's Find X3 Pro. Display. The Oppo Find X3 Pro has a 6.7-inch display, which measures 17.02cm diagonally and has a resolution of 1440p. Its AMOLED screen creates very natural colors and has a pixel density of 525 ppi. It features a refresh rate of 120 Hz and a peak brightness of 1300 nits. Sounds like everything you can wish for on a smartphone screen. Let's have a look at the X2 now. The Find X2 Pro has a 6.7-inch display with a 1440p resolution. It is fitted with an OLED screen which does a fantastic job. The 6.7-inch display therefore measures 17cm diagonally with a pixel density of 513 ppi. The Find X2 Pro has the 2020 must-have feature of an impressive 120Hz refresh rate, even with the highest resolution. Well, as you saw, this is essentially the same screen. The only noticeable upgrade from the X2 to the X3 is the increase in pixel density. But since 12 ppi more isn't really that impressive, and Oppo also went down from Corning Gorilla Glass 6 on the X2 to 5 on the X3, this seems more like a draw. Both get a point. Camera. The Oppo Find X3 Pro has a quad rear camera system. It features a 50 megapixel wide angle, a 50 megapixel ultra wide angle, a 13 megapixel telephoto and a 3 megapixel micro lens camera. Its front camera has a resolution of 32 megapixel. The X3 Pro records 4K videos at a maximum of 60 frames per second. And of course it has optical image stabilization. A very good setup, and the micro lens camera is a cool feature. What has the older sibling got to offer? The Find X2 Pro has three main cameras: a 48 megapixel wide angle, a 48 megapixel ultra wide angle and a 13 megapixel telephoto camera. The front camera's resolution is 32 megapixel and it is built into the hole punch notch in the upper left corner of the screen. The Oppo Find X2 Pro records 4K videos at a maximum of 60 frames. And of course, it has image stabilization for video. Both phones have good camera systems, but which one is actually the better system? Let's take it to our camera test and let's find out which one does a better job. As usual, we first take a look at the pictures taken in daylight conditions on both phones. At first, the most notable difference is that the X3 is brighter than its older sibling. As a result of that, the X2 displays a higher contrast and therefore a little bit more details in the smaller sections of the picture. The X3 Pro on the other hand has a small advantage in terms of sharpness and saturation, but also a little bit more grain. In the last picture, the results of the higher saturation can be seen very well, creating richer colors on the X3. In nighttime conditions, sides are swapped, as the X2 is a lot brighter and therefore able to display a lot more details. This is shown to its full extent on the two cropped pictures. It is very hard to literally recognize most or even any details and contours on the X3. It is just pure mesh. The X2 is doing in comparison a better job, displaying decent amounts of sharpness and details, although also not perfect. Regarding the front camera, on paper nothing actually changed, as both have the same lens. The results, however, differ a bit, mostly due to different white balance. But we can't say that we prefer any of the two above the other. The X2 has a 10-fold hybrid and a 60-fold digital zoom feature, while the X3 Pro has a 5-fold hybrid optical zoom and a 20-fold digital zoom. Okay, so far so good. Now let's switch from photo feature to the video feature, to find out which of these two phones takes better videos. What you see and hear is the quality of Oppo's Find X2 Pro video recording. We set it to the highest possible quality. Let's see what the competitor sounds and looks like. What you can see and hear is the quality of Oppo Find X3 Pro's video recording. We set it to the highest possible quality. Let's see what the competitor sounds and looks like. Oppo definitely increased the sound quality of the Fold series by getting rid of most of the disturbing echoing from the X2 and the X3. In terms of the video quality, however, both do a very good job. The only real differences are that the X2 has a lot more saturation while the X3 has more contrast. Now let's crop in a bit in post to see how that looks like. Again, not a big difference. Both are a bit pixelated as expected, but equally sharp and detailed. Due to the high saturation, the X2 seems a bit warmer. The X3 is sadly a bit grainy. You will only notice this if you look really closely. The more you zoom in, the more noticeable it gets, of course. In terms of slow motion, Oppo didn't change anything. Both are able to shoot slow motion videos in Full HD with up to 240 frames per second and in HD with up to 480 frames per second. Alright. Well, since the great camera system was essentially the embodiment of the X2 and the major reason for its great success, I guess most of you expected this to be the focus of its successor as well. And even though the X3 Pro's camera system is quite good in certain areas, the only improvement notable is in terms of sound quality. Everything else is pretty much the same. And I hate to say it, they even downgraded a bit. This is especially visible in nighttime conditions. Furthermore, Oppo went down from 5-fold optical zoom in its telephoto camera to only 2-fold on the X3. Of course, they added a fourth camera with a microscope lens, but in our opinion this is more like a gimmick. Overall, the X2 has the better camera system and gets the point here. Design. The Oppo Find X2 Pro that we tested in this comparison uses a very elegant vegan leather finish. The triple camera system is well positioned on the upper left corner on the back of the phone. Unfortunately, the bump sticks out a lot, so it won't lie flat on a table. It will definitely wobble a bit. The smartphone weighs 200 grams. The IP68 rating makes it also water and dust resistant. The Find X2 Pro uses face recognition technology and a fingerprint scanner which is built into the screen to unlock the phone. Both technologies work great. There's also a ceramic version available, which is slightly heavier and a tiny bit thinner. Our concern is that the vegan leather might change color over time. It seems like Oppo is, with its vegan leather, open for innovations. Let's see what they came up with for the X3 Pro. The Oppo Find X3 Pro has an aluminum frame and a glass finish on the back. This version has a shiny metallic finish, but there's also a matte blue one available. It features a very futuristic design with a triangular lens camera bump in the upper left corner on the back of the phone. The smartphone weighs 193 grams. It features an USB-C connector and is IP68 rated. That means that it is water and dust resistant. The phone also uses face recognition technology and a fingerprint sensor to unlock the phone. Both technologies work great. As a special feature for sound enthusiasts, the X3 Pro's alarms and ringtones are custom designed by famous producer Hans Zimmer. Since we are comparing an older phone to its successor, the most important questions are, what has changed and which one looks better? Let's start by determining the changes. So, Oppo didn't change that much in the front and side section of the phone. They pretty much look the same, except for the waterfall curved edge screen, which the X3 does not have anymore. Its edges are still curved, but not as deeply angled as on the X2, and the screen doesn't extend as far down the side anymore. The back part is where it gets really interesting, as the two phones look completely different now. While the X2 dropped as the first ever vegan leather smartphone and focuses on comfort and elegance, its younger sibling has a completely different approach. The X3 Pro with its back completely covered in glass and its gradient R camera, which lets the whole backside seem like a uniform piece, focuses more on futuristic ideas. Both phones feel very valuable, but in terms of looks, well, I don't know. Maybe a different color for the leather would have been a better choice. So, which one looks better then? We actually think that it's the Find X3 Pro that has the upper hand here, which is why it gets a point. Battery. The Find X3 Pro, when fully charged, has 4500 mAh. On the other hand, the Oppo Find X2 Pro, when fully charged, has 4260 mAh. Both phones support fast charging, but only the X3 Pro offers fast wireless and reverse wireless charging. The X3 Pro has the bigger battery and the newer technology and should therefore last longer. Let's bring them into our day-to-day usage test and see if that's true. Okay, so in our test the X3 was able to outlast the X2 by quite a bit. This is certainly not surprising, since Oppo put a larger battery in its new phone and has a new 5nm technology, which definitely improved the power consumption. The X3 Pro also has the better charging capabilities and therefore clearly deserves this point. Conclusion. Are you ready for the results? Let's go back once more and collect the points of all 5 categories. When comparing the screens, we noticed that Oppo didn't change much in the display category. So both get a point. In terms of performance, naturally the new Snapdragon 888 made the difference. 1 point for the X3 Pro. Moving on to the camera system. It came as a surprise that it was actually the older sibling that was able to impress more and essentially scored the point. The 4th category, design, was as always a very tricky subject, as it is very opinion based. In the end, we decided to go with the X3 Pro and its futuristic design. And last but not least, battery life. Here it was the same as in the performance section, where the newer hardware and software in the X3 gave it a crucial advantage. Another point for the X3 Pro. Summed up, we have 4 points for the X3 and 2 points for the X2, making the Oppo Find X3 Pro a worthy successor and the winner of this comparison. Naturally, we review more than these 5 categories covered here. If you want to see the full comparison, follow the link to our website. You can compare up to 7 different smartphones at versus.com. But before you do that, please post your comments and let us know which phone you think ranks first. If you liked our video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Till then, take care and see you soon.